It's recording. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at where we've been, where we might be going. All right, so last week we discussed Redux, right? We had just started introducing how to maintain state in a React JS application, right? Up to that point, right? We had been taking data structures, right? Arrays, objects, and then converting them using React functions or components, right, into their equivalent user interfaces, right? So we were able to, iterate over an array of to-dos, right, and render the to-dos, and also render through a list of courses or modules, right, and create a static representation of that data structure as a user interface. But we had no way of manipulating those data structures, right? We wanted to be able to interact with that data, like to be able to maybe create new items, delete them, update them, right? But up to that point, because we cannot maintain state or mutate the state, right? We had no way to, modify those data structures and see those changes reflected in the user interface. So we would like to be able to introduce today, right? What we introduced last week was that we could use several strategies. We looked at using the useState hook, right? That allowed us to, declare state variables that we would be able to manipulate, right? We could manipulate Boolean variables, strings, dates, right? And change their values, and then have those values reflected in the user interface. Let's see, there's a question on the chat. Okay. And so, yeah, and so last week you had a chance to go over through several exercises to practice this mechanism, right? Where you were using the useState hooks and the useEffect hooks, right, to be able to manipulate the state and have the user interface reflect that. We also discussed the fact that just plain old using that the useState hook, we could work with a local state, right, within a component, right? But if we wanted to deal with application level state, it was a little more challenging, right? I mean, we would have a way of using the regular state mechanism from React. You could always move the state to up higher in the context, right, and then have higher level components share that state with lower level components in the hierarchy that are embedded, just by passing the state as an argument, as a parameter to those components. But that creates a very brittle architecture, right? So instead, we took a look at a alternative solution of using Redux. Redux allows us to break apart, right, the maintaining the state within the component, right, so that it can live outside of any component, right, in its own function, in its own reusable and shareable data set, right? So that any component that was interested in knowing what the current state of the application was, they could select pieces of the state, right? So, and you had a chance to practice that as well. So I'm going to review some of those exercises that we covered last week, and so we're going to move on. We're going to be using those skills, right, that you practice in the labs, that you learn how to use state management and Redux. Take those skill sets, right, and then apply them to the Kanbas application that we are building together, right? The assignment that the application that we're building throughout multiple assignments throughout the semester, right? So we're going to take that and practice that, right? Practice those skills to refactor the Kanbas application, right, to make it stateful. Okay. So anyway, that's the plan for today. Also, this week the exam is available. There is a sample exam that you can take a look at, and it has several questions there that are representative of what you can expect for the exam. And so, being an online course, right, you'll have several days to take the exam. When is it more convenient for you? And yeah, you do need about 100 minutes to complete, or maybe 120 minutes. I might have changed it to complete the exam. But it is continuous, right? Once you start, you can't stop, right? You have to go through the whole thing, all right? So anyway, so that's the plan for this week. Also, we are coming to the halfway point of the course, and so next week we're going to be introducing the Node.js server, right? So if you remember, the course was split into two big halves, right? The first half focused on implementing the user interface using React, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, right? And all running inside of a browser, right? With all the great things and bad things, right? All the challenges, right? So definitely running on a browser allows us to have a graphical representation of a user interface, right? And interact with a human being, as a type, and they drag and they click and whatnot, right? And so we can take those inputs from a user interface, and then manipulate the user interface to reflect those changes. But we also have limitations when we're running on a browser. We can't store things in the file system. We can't just willy-nilly talk to anyone on the network, right? We don't have a database. So there's a lot of limitations of when you're running something in a browser for security purposes, technical purposes, right? So next week we're going to introduce a Node.js server, which the intention is to be able to complement the things that we can't do on the browser, right? We're going to offload a lot of that to a server, right? And a server will also be a JavaScript implemented server, right? That will run outside of the browser, so it will not have the limitations of the browser, right? It'll be a JavaScript application that is not constrained by a browser, right? It has full access to the file system, the operating system, right? Can connect to a network, to a database, and so what you can't do on the browser will offload to the server, and then we'll have to integrate these two pieces of the same application. It is the same application, it's just that it's split into two pieces. So or you could think of it as two independent applications that are collaborating, right? One is an application using React.js running on a browser, and the other one is a Node.js server running outside of a browser. And these will be talking to one another using HTTP protocol, right? And sending data across and content and whatnot, right? So that's coming up next week. Let's see what else. Yeah, so the also last week we had quiz 5. This week will be the first exam, and the content of the first exam is also it covers the first 3 assignments, right? That's the scope of the exam. All right. All right. So anybody have any questions about what the plan for this week is? All right, great. Let's run what we have so far in the that we've covered the labs for the 4th assignment, right? It was the content was covered in the prior lecture, right? And so let's take a look at those exercises. Let's review them real quick, right? And then we'll move on and apply those skills from assignment 4, from the labs in assignment 4, right? To refactor, to improve the Kanbas application. Okay. Okay, so let's see. We're in branch 4, and we have here the labs for lab 4 for this the lecture from prior. And first there was covered a lot of things about JavaScript, how to maintain state, how to handle events, clicks, right, and how to maintain different state variables like Boolean state variables, object state variables, arrays, and things like that. So something on the chat. Would you mind sharing the Google Doc for A4? Yes, let me do that. Share, copy, and on the chat, there we go. All right, that's the link. So we worked through those exercises that we discussed how to handle click events, right? And using the onClick attribute, right? That allows us to bind a click event on any element, not only a button, right? We can apply the onClick attribute to any HTML element, right? A div, a paragraph, right? A list, an item in a list, right? So anything. And that you can invoke a function to handle that. We discussed that functions can be treated like any other variable, right? So that we could pass it as an argument to a component, or you can pass it as an argument to a function, right? And then within that function, you could then use the variable, the parameter, the function parameter, right, to invoke that function within your component, right? So we created a little passing data an event where we are passing a function as a parameter, right? So here's a function. So somebody is passing us a function as a parameter, and then within this component, we can invoke that function on click, right? So somebody passes the function, and then we can call back. That's why often these functions are referred to as callback functions, right? Because it's not a function that you declared. It's not a function that is declared in my component. Somebody passed me that function because they are expecting me to invoke it, right, and call them back, right? Kind of like somebody leaves us a phone number, right, and with the intention, right, that we are going to invoke the phone number, right, that we're going to call them back. Yes. So they pass us, or they share their contact information with us so that we can call them back. Right? So same thing here, right? Somebody's passing that function, and then we can invoke that function when as an event handler. So this was a simple hello that passes an argument, and right, and then clicking on a button inside of this, right? We could invoke the hello. We discussed the event objects, how it had a lot of information in there. Most of it is irrelevant to us, but it's important to know what's in these, right? Especially if you want to do something more advanced, like drawing on the screen. You need to be able to detect where the mouse is at every moment. So that's actually included as part of the event objects, right? So we also introduced the use state hook, right, that allowed us to declare state variables. And the hooks, what they do is that they take an initial value and then they return an array, right? So the return from the use state is an array. And what we're doing here, we're destructing that array, right? And we are binding the things that are being returned, the array that's being returned, we are destructing it, into these two local constants, right? One of them is bound to the value of the current value of that state variable, and the other one is a mutator, right? That we use to change the state of the variable, right? We saw that the problem with using regular variables was that even though we were able to manipulate a variable, changing it from true to false, or changing an integer value, we were able to change it by clicking on buttons, right? We could manipulate the value. We realized that those changes were not being reflected in the user interface, right? And we explained that that is because React.js uses lazy a lazy renderer, right? The renderer is lazy by design, right? Once it renders something on the screen, and if I don't know that anything has changed, there's no point in re-rendering anything on the screen, right? As rendered, based on the latest information that I have, there's no point in me rendering anything. But even there are cases where we do want it to re-render because there's a change in a variable, right? And we want to be reflected in the user interface, right? But so we needed a mechanism to notify React that yes, I know you drew the screen already, but there's something changed. I would like you to go ahead and re-render it with this new value, right? Because something changed, or color might have changed, some value might have increased or decreased. So the way we do that is through these mutator functions, right? That notify React.js that says, hey, I know you're ignoring all the changes in the variables, but this change you should not ignore, right? You should re-render the screen anywhere where this value is being used as a label in a button, or the value in a checkbox, or the value of an input field or a text area. Anybody who's using this value, right, should be notified that this value has changed, and that part of the DOM that depends on that value will be re-rendered. Okay, the whole screen doesn't re-render, not the whole screen, right? Only the pieces that have changed, right? So there were several exercises that we went over to illustrate how you use state variables for integers, Boolean, right, string values that allowed us to declare input fields that to manipulate some string, right? We initialized this first name to John, and then we could type and change the value on the fly. We also play around with date variables, objects, arrays. In arrays, we illustrated an example of manipulating an array of integers, right? That we could add new elements to the array, delete the elements, right? Edit the elements. But actually, no, this was just add and delete. And the way we declared it was, again, all these is using the use state hook, right? That allow us to provide an initial value for the array, and then we can manipulate it by appending a random value to the array, right? Where we copied the old value, right? And then we appended a new random value at the end, right? Or that we can delete a particular element in the array, and then we would filter out that element and then use a mutator to update the value of the array, right? And then it would re-render. Okay. Then it says, okay, well, this is all in good. Pretty much we could do everything with just use state, right? There's not much more, right? And so so why look beyond that, right? And so we are introducing another topic called managing application state, right? And so we're trying to solve for a problem that use state, not that use state has any problems, but the use of use state, right, for larger applications other than just small little component state, within a one screen or one component. Use state is perfect, right? You should still use state for that, right? For managing local state, right, of one screen. But when you start considering data that needs to be shared across multiple screens, right, then use state starts losing its appeal, right? You could still do it, right? The trick is to declare the state that if it's going to be shared amongst multiple components, then the state needs to be declared above, right, at a parent of all the elements that are going to be sharing the state, right? And then the parent can then pass to the children, right, that state. And that certainly will work, and we're going to practice that today, right? We're going to re-implement the dashboard and the courses screen using that strategy, right? But the problem that introduces is that you create dependencies between the components, right? That if you ever want to manipulate the structure of the state of where it's being shared and whatnot, that's going to create a huge rework, right? A better solution is to decouple the state instead of having the state live in the components, right? And then use the attributes to share the state. A better solution is to declare that state outside of the component, right? Completely independent. And then the component, if they want the state, they can always access the state, right? But it's no longer declared in the component, right? So instead we looked at a solution called Redux, right? That allows us to do just that, right? To take that state, right, and put it in a separate location that we can then just pull in everything we need, right? So we created a Redux examples screen, right, where we had a chance to play around with Redux, right? So we installed the 3 libraries necessary for this, right? And then we created our very first, our simplest of examples, right, of using this technology, right? And the idea was, okay, so we already had seen using useState to manipulate Boolean variables, string variables, arrays, objects. So here's an equivalent of manipulating just a string, right? A simple string. So here we have the data, right, that we want to be able to access or manipulate is just this little object that has a property called message, right? And then we have the hello world. And then you can create a what is called a slice, right? That is the maintainer of the state, and it's also responsible for manipulating the state, right? And although not really manipulating the state, right? Instead, in the Redux jargon, is that we compute the next state, right? Based on the prior state. So we never change the state, right? Instead, we calculate what the next state is based on prior state, right? And so yeah, we initialize it, we give it the initial state. Then we create a store, right? And the idea here was that we're going to have many different slices of data, right? Usually we want to break up, in a large application, you want to break up the data usually is going to be fairly consistent, right? There's going to be something considerably complex. And you're usually going to break it out into multiple slices, right? Depending on the screen and which part of the application you're in, right? If you're in the shopping cart, or if you are in your profile, you're in your orders, right? So each screen typically will have its own slice, right? And then we collect all those slices into a single store. Right? Here we have a single reducer, the hello reducer, and here this would be a comma separated list or object collection of all the reducers, right, that make up the entire store data storage, right? And then we would provide that store to the rest of the application with the provider tag. Now, all components, any component, right, in here within the provider, inside of the provider, so anything in here, right, any components in the body of the provider can use the selector hook here, right, to extract data from the store, right? So in the store, we are storing the data for the hello reducer. We named the hello reducer over here, so we can retrieve it, state.hello reducer. And in there is what? In here is the state that we put in there, meaning some object that has a property called message. And that's why here we are destructing that to extract the message, right? And we're displaying it, right? So we demonstrated being able to read data from the storage. We then demonstrated that not only can we read the data, right, but we can also manipulate the data, change it, right? So we demonstrated that with a counter, right, example where the value is just an integer, and we want to be able to increase it or decrease it over time, right? Presumably, as I click two buttons, right? A plus and a minus, right? That will manipulate this, right? And then we focus on how is it that we integrate this, right? We first pull in the new counter reducer, right, into the store, right? And now it's being provided. Anybody can access this using the selector. And yes, we created a counter reduce component, counter redux component that it can extract the current count, right, and display it. There it is. So it's whatever, it's whatever initial value, 5. But then we also, from the reducer, we get a hold of the functions that we declared in there, right? The 2 functions that were declared in there are going to be able to manipulate the state. Well, in our case, the counter. Right? It's going to either increase it by 1 or decrement it by 1, right? But the way we talk to those 2 functions that we're extracting from the reducer, we do need to wrap them inside of a dispatch. Right? The dispatch is the magic that communicates the user interface, right, with the reducer functions. Okay. So we could invoke those functions. It would manipulate the state. It would actually increment. We could see the values change up and down. We then explored being able to pass data to a reducer, right? So we built a small little calculator, right, that declared several state variables and state functions, right, that we would be able to invoke and pass in an argument. Here we are passing, for instance, values A and B, and that's available in the second argument of the reducer function, right, that contains the payload. Is an object that contains all the attributes, all the parameters that you're passing, right, in a map. So it's a map of all the parameters that are being passed in. In this case, we're expecting to pass A and B, and at reducer here is indeed what we are passing, right? We get dispatch, and then we send A and B. So where A is the name of the property, and then it's also the value of the property. Okay. And then we then spent some time revisiting how arrays work, but within the context of the reducer. Right, we implemented a small little to-do list, right, that in a reducer, right, where we had some initial value, and we were able to edit the to-do, add more, remove, edit the to-do, right. But then we wanted to explore, how do you break this into smaller pieces, right? We have this big to-do list that had the data in there. That allowed us to add new to-dos, delete, update, right? And then it renders the to-dos and allows us to edit the to-do and whatnot, right? So it'll delete the to-do. But then usually you want to break up into smaller pieces, right? So how do we break it up, right? So the big to-do list, we broke it up into I think 3 components, right? We have the to-do item, right? Which is this is basically this here, right? This big line item. This big line item over here. We want to break it up. Here's pretty simple, right? But we could certainly make it more complex. And so we are rendering the title, and then we have the buttons. Now these buttons invoke functions that are not declared in here in the to-do item. They're actually being maintained by a parent to-do list, right? So we're being passed here the functions, the data that would allow us to delete the to-do, right, or manipulate the to-do, right? And then we broke up the to-do list into these to-do form, to-do item. As we iterate, right, we render each to-do item, and then we pass in all of the event handlers so that it can handle deleting the to-do, right, or resetting it. Okay. But the alternative is to instead not maintain the state in the to-dos at all, right? Instead, rip that out, right, and move it into a reducer who can handle the state, right? It can handle all the events, right, that will manipulate the data. So here's a reinvented version of the to-do list, but using Redux. Okay. All right. Yeah, so let's use now those skills, right, to refactor the Canvas application, right? We're going to be using a combination of use state hooks, of use effect, of Redux, right? And so this will illustrate how we can use these skills, right, to in a actual application, right? All right, so let's take a look at how we can use the skills that we learned about maintaining state with the use state hook, the use effect, and as well as Redux, right, to implement either local state at the local component or screen level, right, or using or using Redux, right, to implement application-wide state that we need to share across multiple screens. All right. So let's see. So the current implementation that we have from Kanbas, right, is taking a data structure that contains courses and modules and assignments, right, and then converting that, right, literally calculating, right, all that data is passing through a function that calculates the user interface, right? What is the user interface correspondence to that data structure, right? And we built that, right? We created a whole bunch of components, the Canvas component, the courses component, the navigation components, right? The dashboard, all those collaborate, right, to convert that data structure of courses and modules and assignments into a user interface, right? But currently the data is static, right? It cannot change over time, right? We can't create new courses, we can't delete a course, you can't update a course, right? So the even though it's dynamic, right, because it is being calculated and rendered on the fly, right? It is data driven. That the resulting user interface is always the same, right? It's static. It doesn't change over time. So we're going to refactor Canvas so that it can change over time, right? It can be different, and, as we manipulate the data structure by being able to create new courses, edit a course, delete a course, right? And then we'll do the same thing for modules. Okay. So currently the dashboard looks something like this, right? Where it takes an array of courses from what we call a database. It's not really a database, right? It's just an object that contains other objects, right, that represent arrays of courses, arrays of modules, right, arrays of assignments, right, and then it calculates this user interface dynamically. Right? So let's take a look at that. So we have here in code, we're going to run the React.js application. Right, and it's available, let's see, here it is, right? So here's the application. We can take a look at the Canvas, and what this is doing is that it's using our database with, of courses, iterating over it, right, and then rendering each one of these cards in a grid pattern, right? So the implementation right now is as follows. It's right here, right? If we go to our Canvas, right, we can take a look at the dashboard, right? And in the dashboard, we can see that we have this database, again, quote unquote database, right? It's just a big object that contains several other objects, including these courses from this JSON file, right? That just has an array of multiple objects, right? Each one representing a course, right? And so the implementation of the dashboard is basically, iterating over that courses, right? Iterating over it. And for each course, right, it renders this card, including this hyperlink that if you click on it, it allows you to navigate to that course, right? It renders an image, it renders the course name, the description of the course, right? It just creates a whole bunch of links, right? Laid out in a grid. Okay, so that's what we have so far. Now we can't manipulate that courses right now, right? It is not a state variable. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to convert this into a state variable, right? So that we can, just like we did for the to-dos, right? In the to-do list example, we want to do the same thing. We want to take that array of things, right? Create a state variable out of it, so then we can manipulate that array. Okay. In this case, the courses, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to take the courses variable that we have right now, right? And we're going to wrap it in using the use state. And what use state will do is it will allow us to then set the courses, right? So we're going to get this mutator, right? That's going to allow us to manipulate the data. Right now, the implementation is that the courses is static, right? It's just a constant. We can't manipulate that, right? So we're going to wrap this in use state. So let's do that. So right now, here's the rendering, right? It renders just fine. I can navigate. We can see the modules for that, right? So let's do that. We're going to import use state. So import use state, right, from React. And so we're going to wrap this like this. And this is going to be use, parentheses, and then say use state, like that, right? If we go back, this still renders the same way. So we haven't done anything, right? It works just the same way. So this is equivalent to what we have so far. Right? Use state takes initial value of the state variable, initializes it, and then it gives us back to us, right? It gives us back a reference to its internal data structure. So it's maintaining an internal copy of it, right? It gives us a reference to it, and then we can just render it and treat it like the original constant, right? But it can also give us as a second element of this array, of this destructor, right? We're destructing this array. It's going to give us a mutator, right? Set courses. And what this is going to allow us to do is to change that array of courses, right? Either by appending a new course, right? Or removing a course, or replacing a course with another version of the same course to update. Make sense? So this works just the same. Nothing has changed. When we refresh, it looks exactly the same way. Okay. All right. So we did that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a little form, right? That is going to allow us to edit the course, have a button, to be able to add a new course. So what we'll do is that first we'll add a course. We'll implement that. We'll create an initial version of the course, right? With some dummy values, right? With some dummy ID, name for the course, number for the course, and so on and so forth. So we'll create a data representation, and the data structure for the course, the schema, right? Name, number, image, start date, blah 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 blah, right? Should be equivalent to the current schema of the objects that live in our array, right? Because our user interface is expecting this format for the courses, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're gonna grab one of these, right, as a sample, right? And we're going to go back to our dashboard, and we're going to create a dummy course. We're going to say course, and we're going to paste that in there, right? And we're going to just come up with some dummy values, 1, 2, 3. So this is a new course, right? And then this was a new course number, and this is a dummy course. Okay. All right. So we have an initial value of our course, and what we're going to do is that if we want to add or append a new course, right? What we're going to do is that we're going to take this course. Just to see that we can manipulate this and create new courses, right? We're going to create a function here that's going to say const add course. So basically it's going to, yeah, exactly, right? It's going to append the course, right, to an existing array of courses, okay? We'll take that course, right, and it's going to append it. Now, this ID, we need it to be unique, right, because that ID is being used as a key, right? It is being used as a key to this div, and that key needs to be unique. And in general, primary keys need to be unique. Now, in this case, because we're using the user interface only, right? We don't have a database, we don't have a server yet, right? We're going to be creating the primary key ourselves here in the user interface. But eventually, right, we're going to have the backend, the database, handle the primary keys, right, for us. So we don't have that just yet. So in here, we're going to calculate a new course. So I'm going to copy the template course. We're going to grab the template course, but then I'm going to override the ID. So the ID, I'm just going to take the current time right now, convert it into a string. I'll take that as a unique value for the primary key, right? And so that's going to be the new course that I'm going to append. Okay. Now, because there are so many courses, I'm going to actually prepend it. I'm going to put it at the beginning of the array, right? So that we can see it right away when we create it, okay? Now, when should we create this course? Well, we need a button. We need a button that, if we click that button, is going to invoke this function, which will append the course, right? So let's add a button here. It's suggesting that we do this. Let me just copy that. So I'll put that right under the dashboard header. So under the dashboard header, right here. So we're going to create here an add button. So a new course, a new button that is going to display as blue, right? And it's going to invoke add course. So this function like that, okay? And it's going to be add, all right? So how does that render? There it is, right? Here's a new course, and here's our add button right there. Okay? So let's try it out. So let's see add. There it is, right? New course. And I can add any number of courses after that. Maybe for the name of the course, what we could do to make it a little more obvious that these are all new, we're going to say that the name, right, is going to be the course.name, but then I'm going to append the length of the array or something like that, right? Maybe this could be like that. So this could be, oops, like that. So it'll be the course name, and then appending the courses length, right? Something like that. So that if I add more, right, it'll say 27, right? 27, 28, 29. Now notice that if I refresh, obviously all that goes away, right? There is no permanence because again, we don't have a place to store any of this, right? We can't write it to the file system. We can't store it in a database, right? We can't send it anywhere just yet. We don't have a server. But next week when we introduce Node.js, right, we will have a place, right, to send it over, right, and make this a permanent update. Okay. So this works, right? I'm adding any number of courses. Now, one problem that we have here is that if I click on this, right, notice that it goes to the home screen of the course, but this ID, right, doesn't exist, right? Well, it's not in the database because right now this screen is fetching that course's ID is fetching it from the database of the array that has not changed, right? It still only has those 21 courses, right? And none of that are those using that ID, right? So obviously this home screen modules, they don't exist, right, for that course. So it's not rendered. So we'll come back to this and fix this a little later. Okay, so we have that. All right, so we can click and add some new courses, so that works. All right, how about being able to edit a course? So instead of always adding a hard-coded version of the course, right? We would like to maybe edit the name of the course before it's added. So basically, we would like to be able to manipulate, right, this course over here, right, so that we can set the name of the course and the title or start date and whatnot, right, and then add that updated value. Okay. So as always, right, to be able to manipulate any data structure, we need to convert it into a state variable, right? So let's do that, right? We're going to, again, I'm going to wrap that in using a use state, right? And surrounded with the square brackets to destruct what the use state returns, right? And then we can build an input field, several forms that can edit each one of those fields, all right? So let's do this. I'm gonna wrap this inside of a use state. This is like that, use state, and we can alternatively tell it what is the data type of the data type, right, of the state variable, right, and then it returns a reference to the course. So and this should render just the same way, right? It renders. So this still works just the same way as before, right? But now, right, because it's a state variable, right, I can manipulate this. I can manipulate this, the name, the number, the start date, right? And once it's been edited, right, with the input fields, right, when I click on add, it'll be able to add the updated version, right? So let's do that. Let's create a, below the heading, we'll create a break, an input field and text area that we can edit it, right? So let's do that, let's copy that. Okay, and right under the button right here, under the header, where's the header, where does it click? Oh, it's under here, okay, right there. We'll paste that. So let's see how it renders. So there it is, right? So here's the input fields for the title of the course, for the description, right? That is allowing us to display the name of the course, right, in the description. That we should be able to edit it now, right? So, but notice that if I try to edit it, right, it doesn't edit, right? See that? It doesn't edit. It's only displaying the content as read only. And the reason is that these input fields are being initialized, right? They're setting the value from those properties in that object, right? And unless I change those, right, you're not gonna see the change be reflected in the form element, right? So let's do that. Let's work on adding input fields, right, or on change handlers, right, to be able to manipulate those, right? So let's do that. Let's add the on change for both of them, for both the input field and the text area. So here they are. So I'm going to just replace these two, right? And they just added the on change, and I guess the names. I'm not using the same names for the mutators. Okay, I didn't declare the mutator here. Set course. There it is, right? So now the input fields are going to allow me to change the course name and change the description for the course, right? Where before it didn't allow me to edit it, right? So, okay, so if I go here, now I should be able to manipulate this, right? So this could be, new course. I can't move this. Say 1, 2, 3, or 2, 3, 4, and say add. Notice that now, see that it is taking the edited version of the name of the course, add, like that. Okay, make sense? All right, awesome. Okay. So what else? Right. So we are able to add courses, right? We can edit the course before being added. And so it's let's have, how about now being able to remove a course that I've just added, or even a course that already was there, right? So the idea would be that I want to add a delete button, right? So each course card would have its own little delete button, right? And when you click on the delete button, right, it should be removed from the array, right? And you would not see it anymore in the user interface, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to use a delete course, right? That is going to basically going to filter out, right? It's going to compute a new array of courses that is going to have that particular course missing, right? It's not going to be there. So effectively we're removing it from the array of courses, right? So let's do that. So here we can say, we can implement delete course, right? And so it's going to take as argument the ID of the course that we want to remove, and we're going to filter it out, right? So we can say, new courses is going to be the old courses and filtering out that particular course, right? And then setting the new courses like this, right? And then what we're going to do is that we're going to call this delete course, right, with a button that we're going to show in each one of the each one of the cards, right? We're going to show it right next to the go button, right? So let's copy that. So we have the let's see, we have the go button. Here's the go button. So right below that, we get another button, right? That is going to render in red, right? And it's going to invoke, right? There it is, the delete, right? So it's going to invoke that delete function, and it's going to pass it. It's going to pass, right, the ID of the course, right, which is going to be filtered out. All right. All right. So let's try it out. All right. So if we go and now we click on this, notice that indeed, right, it allows us to filter out each one of these courses. Okay, makes sense. Everybody good? Okay. Yeah, so we're able to delete the courses, right? So let's continue. Let's now see if we can edit the course. So what we could do is that add an additional button that if we click on it, right, basically it'll copy the values of the course, copy it onto the fields that we have already, right? The description field, the name of the course field, right? So that we can edit it, right? So basically, when we click on the edit, right, it'll just set the course, right? It will update the course fields with the title, the name, and the description, so that we can then edit it, right? So yeah, so let's do that. So let's grab this copy, right, and let's just put it right next to where we put the delete button, right? All right, so here's the delete button, and let's paste in this new edit function, edit button, right, which is basically we'll grab the course that we're iterating over. We'll take the course, right, and then set it so they can be edited, right? So yeah, so there it is. We put it in the wrong place. So let's put it afterwards. Delete button right there. There it is, right? So basically what it'll do is that if we click on it, it's going to set, right, the fields over here so that we can edit it, right? We can edit it, or this one or that one. Well, it's just copying, right? Copying each one of the values of each one of the course objects, right, and just pasting it onto the the mutator, using the mutator to set the course so you can edit it, right? Now, obviously, it's not doing anything. I mean, we can't edit it, but it's not really manipulating anything here, right? So we need an extra step, right? Not only do we need to copy, edit it here, right, but then we need to save those changes, back to the object that that was copied from, right? So yeah, so the way we could do that, right, is by maybe adding an additional button, maybe like an update button, right, in our form. That we'll do is that basically we'll compute a new array of courses that is going to swap out, right, the course that was the old course. Is going to swap it out, right, and is going to replace it with this new version of the course, right? So yeah, so what we'll do is that we'll create an update course, right? So we'll put it right next to maybe the add button, but the function here, right? That basically what it does is that it calculates a new array of courses that is made up of the old array of courses, but swapping out if the as it's iterating, it's looking at each one of the courses and says, okay, well, if I find the course that you want to swap out, right, I'm going to take the new version of the course. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep the old version, right? So there it is. So here's it's going to create the new array, looking for the course. If it finds the course, it's going to replace it with the version that has been edited. Otherwise, it's going to keep the old course here, okay? And then we're going to call this, right, with a button that we're going to render, right next to the add button. Right, so now right next to the add button, we're going to right here, right after the add button, we'll paste that in there. It's going to call the update button, right? It's yellow, and it's going to save it back into the array. All right, let's try it out. Let's see. Let's refresh. Let's edit this one. Right, so we can say, rocket propulsion 101. Let's say update. There's my update, and notice that indeed it's updated. The array gets updated, right, with this new version of the course. Okay. Yeah. So right. So basically, we have all the basic CRUD operations, right? We can create, we can read, we can update, we can delete, make courses, right? Now the problem though is that all this data, right? All these changes, all these new courses, all the removals and whatnot, all those changes only exist within the context of this screen, right? The dashboard screen, and that's it, right? Certainly they don't exist. If I navigate to the courses screen, notice that I've changed it here. If I go there, notice that it's still using the old name for the course, right? So the changes have not reflected. It's not widely available throughout the application. It's only available in the dashboard, right? So we need to fix that, right? And again, there are two ways of fixing it. One is using the useState hook, right? And then moving all this data state manipulation to a parent, right? And then sharing it down with anyone who wants to access that data. That's one way of fixing it. The other way of fixing it is using Redux, right? So let's take a look. Yeah, so right, so we want to share all the changes that we've done in the dashboard of adding courses, removing courses, changing names and whatnot, right? We want to share it with other screens, in particular the courses screen, right? And the problem we have, right, is that those changes only live in the dashboard, right? And we have two ways of fixing that. We either move the state to a parent, maybe the Kanbas application, the Kanbas component, which is its parent to both the dashboard and the course, or we add a Redux. So first we're going to learn how to use the useState, right? And moving the state around, the event handlers, right? And then we're going to share that to the child elements. Right? So let's do it that way first. Now, if we move all this, all this work that we've done in the dashboard, we're going to take all that work we've done, we're going to move it up to the parent, the Kanbas component, right, which is parent to both the dashboard and the courses. But then, so since it's not going to live here in the dashboard, we still need access to it, right? We still need those. We still need the array of courses, the course that we're editing, right? All those things we still need here. So even though we're going to move it up to one component, to the parent component, I still need access to it. So what we do is that we're going to pass references, right, to the courses and the event handlers, which are going to be declared in the Kanbas component, right? It's going to be shared as parameters to the dashboard. All right. Okay, so let's do that. Let's declare, right, in the dashboard. We're going to declare a new signature, which is going to say that I am dependent on all these things, right? You need to pass me the courses because all these state, use state, blah, blah, all that, I'm gonna cut it out from here. I'm gonna remove from here like that. It's gone. It's no longer there. Okay, and then I'm gonna move it to the parent. And the parent is right here, the Kanbas. Right here, right? So I'm going to put it in there, paste it in there, and I'll need to import the use state. There we go, right? And now that it's declared, courses. Oh, did I miss set course? Yeah, I forget. I think I missed this one. I put it in there. There we go. And I need the database. So it's the database. The database here. Declare right there. So basically, we moved all that was declared in the dashboard. We moved it up here in the Kanbas, right? But now we need to share it with the dashboard. The dashboard is expecting references to all that. See that? So let's do that. Let's declare here the dependencies. So we get courses is courses, right? And then course, then set courses. Set courses equals to set courses, right? And then set course. Set course. Oh wait, no, just set course. Sorry, just set course. Plus all the new functions. You know, add new course, delete course, update course. I think that's it. I think we got them all. Well, course says course, set course, add course. Wait, add new course. Okay, add new course. Oh, add new course takes no argument. Add new course. Okay, takes no argument. That's fine. Why are you complaining? Delete blah 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 function implementation missing or not immediately following the declaration. Huh? Oh, am I missing a curly bracket? There we go. I was missing a curly bracket. And I don't need any of this, right? Because I don't have the database anymore, right? I don't have the use state anymore because all that moved to my parent, right? So now my parent has this, all these implementation, but it shared it with me, right, through these attributes. And so if we go back, this should work just the same, right? There we go. So it works just the same, right? No problem. We can add new courses. I can edit the. Oops. I can edit edit this, right, to be 1 2 3 update. So I can delete. So it works just the same way as before, right? So yeah, we did that, and the whole point of this is that it's because, right, we wanted to be able to navigate to courses, right, and see my new courses here, right, the name displayed here. We don't have that right now, and so just like we shared with the dashboard, we're now going to share with the courses over here, right? The courses is going to receive the array of courses, right, from the parent as opposed to currently reading it from the database, right? So let's take a look at that. Right, so so what we're gonna do is that now that we moved everything to the parent Kanbas, right? The add new course, delete, update. Now it all lives up there. We passed in all the references. Well, we're gonna do the same thing with courses. We're gonna pass in courses as an attribute, right? So we'll say courses. We're gonna pass you the courses as the references to courses. And here, instead of using this this courses from the database, well, no, now it's going to be an argument, a parameter that I'm going to pass here, right? I'm going to say, I'm going to pass in the array of courses right here, like that. And then instead of, now these courses, right, are not read from the database like that. So I'm going to comment that out. It's coming as an argument. Make sense? Right. So now any changes that I have done to that array, including having added new courses, deleted courses, changed the title of the course, now they will be available because it's being shared across two screens. Are going to use the same representation of the array of courses. Right. So yeah, so let's see that. So if I go back in the dashboard, right, and notice that new course, if I click on it, now I do have a reference to it. See that, right? Or if I go back and manipulate, notice the rocket propulsion. I changed the name of the course. Notice that now I do see the change. See that? So since this one aerodynamics, there it is. But if I change this and I edit, this is aerodynamics 101, and I say update. There it is 101, and then notice that I can see the change now in two different screens. I can see the change, which is that was the point, right? And the only way to do that is to move the state to a parent and then share it down to its children. Okay. So that's one way, right? One way, right? The other way is to use Redux, right? But not quite yet. Not quite yet, right? So let's first practice what we just did, right? But for manipulating the modules of a course, right? So let's do that. So let's see. So we have so let's take a look at modules, right? And so we want to be able to basically do the same thing with modules, right? We're gonna take we're gonna take the array of modules that we currently have, and we're gonna convert them into state variables, right? So that we can append new courses, delete courses, edit courses, do all the basic CRUD operations on modules, right? But then we also want to be able to share that with other screens, right? So for instance, if I go to the home screen uses the same content of modules, right? So the way we can share that, even with other things, right? Not necessarily there, but in the assignment screen we might need it, in the quizzes screen we might need it, right? The list of modules. So to do that, we're going to use a Redux this time. So first, let's create the state variables so that we can manipulate them, right? And so we get a chance to practice that. And then we're going to move all that logic into a reducer. Okay. All right. So let's do that. So let's in the modules, right? We're going to take the current implementation of modules and we're going to create a state variable out of it, right? So let's see. Okay, so let's see. Let's go into modules. Here we have index, right? And currently, right, it's using the database modules, right? In the database. Okay. So yeah. So instead of doing this, right, we're going to create a state variable out of this. Right. So let's see. Yeah, so we'll create a state variable out of this. We'll say this is a state variable. This is going to be use state. Use state from React. And this is going to be, I'm going to initialize it with db modules. So all the modules. And this is going to be an array of any, right? And then the modules, I don't want to see all the modules, right? I want to filter it, just this filter I had before. I want to still do that, right? I only want to see the modules for the current course, right? So to do that, we're going to grab the modules, right? And we're going to filter them. We're going to say modules, we're going to filter, say filter, right? And so this is the modules. So basically this filter over here, right? There it is, that one. Right there. There we go, right? So the filtering happens here. So this should work exactly the same way, right? So if we go here, oh, probably I need these to be declared also as any lessons. Probably this needs to be of type any. There we go. So it works just the same way, right? I'm in of course I don't have any modules there, but if I have rocket propulsion, these are the modules for rocket propulsion. All three modules are there. So it works exactly the same way. But now, because it's a state variable, I'm going to be able to manipulate it, right? I'm going to be able to append new modules, delete modules, update modules. So let's do that. Let's practice that. So first, let's create a dialog, right? That if we want to edit a module, it'll pop up as a dialog, right? Where I'm going to be able to, type in the new title, the new description, right? And just say, add module, right? So let's give us a chance to practice a different way of creating. Certainly we could have taken the same strategy that we did with courses, right? Where the form would be embedded in the same screen. This is somewhat the same way, right? But it's implementing a different component, right? And that component shows or doesn't show, right? When we click on a button, right? It appears, it'll be rendered as a dialog, right? It'll obscure the background, right? It'll just display as a separate little rectangle, right? Separate from the background, right? But basically, it's just a component, right? That we're going to toggle on and off. Right? So let's create this and we'll put it in module editor. Right? So we'll do here in modules. We'll create a module editor. So module editor TSX. And we'll copy that in there. Module editor. There it is. And it's using the common Bootstrap dialog classes, right? That I've changed a little bit, right? Customized so that the dialog, the title of the dialog, it can be configured, or you can pass an argument of what you want the title dialog to be. And you can see the implementation, the documentation for the dialog here. If you go to Bootstrap, look for dialog, modal dialog. So this is the modal dialog, which just pops up, right? And then here is you can render any components, including input fields, complex forms or images or things like that, right? And you can dismiss it. Now, for this to work, you will need to have imported Bootstrap's JavaScript, right? So I did that here in the index, right? Remember that we had imported the Bootstrap CSS a while back, right? When we did assignment 2, I think, right? But many of the components that do animation or modals or drop downs, they do need the JavaScript as well, right? Most of them don't, but some of them do. And here I've added here dependencies with the JavaScript module, for Bootstrap, right? Yeah, so we have that dialog, and we want it to show up something like this, right? Here's add module. It'll pop up. You can let us type the input field, click on add module, and it disappears. It allows us to add it, right? And so when do we show this, right? Where do we show this? So what we'll do is that we're going to add a 2, right? When you navigate to a course, if you remember, right, we in a prior lecture, right, we implemented the controls up here, right, that have a drop down, and for in your assignment you were supposed to create a whole bunch of other buttons, right? But there is an add module in there, right? And what we want to be able to do is, when we click on that, that's when we want the dialog to appear, right? Which right now it's not doing anything, right? So when we click on that, we want to show that dialog, right? So okay, so what we'll do is that we'll go into that component. I think it was called modules controls, right? That has that plus in there. We'll put in the module editor in there, right? And then the plus module, we're going to bind, right, the module editor with the plus button, so that when we click on the plus button, right, it'll show up the module editor, right? Also, since the module editor is going to be manipulating the data structure that represents the modules, we're going to need some communication, right? When the module editor, when I click on save, right, it needs to be able to call a function and say, oh, the new module name is so and so, right? So let's do that. So let's in the module controls. So let me bring the module controls. There it is, right? There is the plus button somewhere. Where is the plus button? Okay, it's this one, I believe. Yeah, it's this one right here, right? And so what we're going to do is that at the bottom of this controls, we're going to put the module editor, and we're going to toggle it because we gave it an ID, right? The module editor, we gave it an ID. Here, so here's the module editor. Notice that we give it an ID, and the way Bootstrap binds a button with a dialog box, right, is by their ID, right? So we gave it the ID of the dialog box, WD add module dialog, right? And so the button we're going to give it that the target, right, that should open that dialog is by giving it the ID. All right, so let's do that. Let's copy the module editor, right? In the controls, we'll put it at the bottom. Doesn't really matter where you put it. It's going to be position fixed, right? Absolute, right, on top of the rest of the screen, right? So it doesn't really matter where you put it on the screen because it's always going to be not showing. It'll only show when you click on the dialog, right? So right, we have that. We don't have these here. And then now the plus button, we're going to use Bootstrap mechanism to deal with modal dialogs, right, to open up that ID, right? So let's go up to the plus button, and oh, I had already put it in there. Oh, there it is. Yes, I did put it in there. Okay. And we'll need the module editor as a dependency. So we'll need to import this. Import it, add import. Okay, we don't have a module name right now. We don't have a function for this just yet. So all of those are going to live in the parent module, right? That's where we're going to have the state variables to deal with all that, right? So we're going to have to pass that in here, right? So I'm going to pass it in through the modules control, right? So let's copy that. So the modules control, I'm going to change it a little bit so that it's going to pass all those dependencies, this is one of the reasons we don't use sometimes the use state, right? Is that you're going to find yourself passing the state and the event handlers, that were declared in one component and sharing it across multiple other components, right? And so, keeping track of what it is that you're passing from one component to the next can be very challenging, right? So that's one of the appeals of techniques such as Redux, right? That wherever you're maintaining state, it doesn't live in the user interface, so you're not sharing this across, right? You can always just retrieve it from a selector or something, or dispatch, or you import them, right, from the reducer whenever you want to invoke them, right? But you don't create the dependencies between the components, right? So anyway, so we pass that in, and the module controls, I don't believe we have that. So we'll have to pass that in as well from the modules. So let's do that. Let's create an input. We're going to create the state variable that's going to hold the name of the new module, right? And when you click on the add button, right, it's going to take that new name, right, and it's going to append. We're going to create a brand new modules object, right, with no lessons, right, linked with the course, right, with the course ID, right, and then it's going to blank out the name of the module, right. So let's do that. So in the modules, here, let's declare the state variables here, like that, and this is the mutator for the modules, and we're going to pass those dependencies to the module control that weren't there before. Modules control. There we go. Right. All right. So let's try it out. Now, if we click on modules, right, it pops out the name of the module, and we can say module 1, 2, 3, add module, right, and it appends it at the bottom. See that? Say, or add module, or cancel. So say, add module, module 2, 3, 4, add module, and it appends it at the bottom. See that? Everybody good? Yeah. So that's the be able to create new modules, right? Right. So what about now being able to maybe delete a module, right? Maybe each module should have like a little trash can, right? And by clicking on that trash can, right, the module should go away. All right. So this is implemented, right? This over here, this right hand side is implemented with I think it was called like module control buttons or something, and it's I think it's this one right here, right? So this one renders this right here. So we're going to add a trash can right next to it, right? So right now it's implemented as just some simple check marks, a plus button, and an ellipses, right? So this right here, the check mark, the plus button, and the ellipses here. See that? So we're just going to add a trash can to this. So we're going to import the trash can icon, right? And when we click on it, we're going to call back a function that you're going to pass us, right, as an argument. I'm going to pass you the ID of the module that I want to remove, and it's going to call the delete modules that is declared in the parent, right? So yeah, so let's do that. So right here, we're going to add a trash can. We'll need to import the trash can. And this module, delete module, is going to pass it as an argument. So let's take that as the dependencies here. So we're passing the ID of the module that we want to remove, and a reference to the function that deletes the module, right? And we're going to pass in the ID when we delete it. Okay. And so in the modules controls, right? Sorry, in the modules, right? We had implemented the add module. Now we have to implement the delete module, right? And the delete module is basically filtering out that module by their ID, right? So let's implement that right besides the implementation of add module in the modules component, right? We had implemented the add module. We'll put in the delete module right here. So basically it's just iterating, right? Filtering out that module's whose ID we're going to pass as an argument, right? And it's going to update the array, and it'll just disappear because it's no longer in the array. Okay. So and then we're going to pass in the dependency, right, to the module controls buttons, right, so that it can call us back, right, telling us, you know, which module we want to remove, right. So in the modules control, there it is, right. We'll replace this and pass in the dependencies. So now, right, we have the trash can, and if we click on it, right, it just disappears, right, whenever we remove it, even if it's a new one. Add modules, right? So if we create several of these, right, even if you know, older ones or the new ones that I've created. Obviously, if you refresh, none of these changes are permanent, right? The only way to make these permanent is to, you know, notify a server which would store all this back into some database, right? And that's all the topic starting next week, right? When we start talking about servers, MongoDB, and whatnot. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we can delete a module. How about being able to edit a module? Again, you know, there's several different ways that can be implemented, right? You know, for instance, creating a new module, we went with the, you know, pop up a dialog, you know, type in the name and then say, yep, okay, save that. We could do the same thing for editing a module, right? We could, you know, pop up the same dialog, right? And then we could reuse it so that if you can edit the module to be some new name, click on save, right? And we update the module. You could do that. So I'd like to show you a different way. So we'll first add a pencil, right, next to the trash can, which is going to set the state of the module as being in the editing status, right, in the mode or modality, right? And so, and if it is in the editing modality, it's going to replace this input, this text. It's going to replace it with an input field, right? So that we can edit it in place, right? So instead of, you know, bringing up a, you know, a secondary indirect manipulation of the data, right, with this with a new dialog, instead this one's going to be a little more direct, right? If I say edit, right, I can, you know, edit it in place, right, not in like in a separate dialog. All right, so let's do that. So in the module controls, right, we're going to add a pencil. So let's grab that. So next to the next to the trash can, right, right here, we're going to add a pencil. We'll have to import the pencil, and we're going to not only pass in the delete function, we're going to pass in an edit module function, right? That it's going to, you know, put the module in edit mode, right? So yeah, so we're going to add edit module here as an argument, like that. And now we have to pass it. We have to pass it from the parent, the modules, right? So in the modules, we're going to grab the edit, right, function that basically what it does, right, it updates the state of the module to be editing true, right? So it just turns on a flag saying, yeah, you are editing this module, and that's going to drive the user interface to not render the title, but instead render an input field in its place, right? So it's going to toggle, right? It's going to change its representation with a input field as opposed to the label, right? And that's going to allow us to edit it in place, right? And then when we press enter, right, it's going to toggle again. The editing is going to change to false, right? So it's going to update the value, right? It's going to save it. It's going to actually update, right? And it's going to set the editing to false, right? So that it no longer renders as an input field, but as just a label, right? So let's copy these two in modules. So in modules, let's add those two here. And we're going to pass them in as arguments to the module control buttons. So the module control buttons, where is it? Module control buttons, there it is. We'll have to, oops. Is that it? There it is, edit module. Why are you complaining? Edit module, oh, I didn't declare it. See, yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so clicking on that pencil, right? Now we have the pencil, there it is. If I click on it, it'll put it in edit mode, right? But I'm not doing anything with that edit mode, right? I need to update the user interface to toggle this label, right? And in its place, display an input field, right? So what we'll do is that here was the module. We were only rendering the module name right here here, right? We were just only rendering the module name. But in its place, I want to show an input field, right? So the input field might look something like this. So here's the input field, right here, right there, right? Right, so this is their input field. Now it renders weird here. It's rendering both the label, right? And then it's rendering its, its editing version of this, right? But I don't want to show these both at the same time. I only want to show this when I click on the pencil, when it's in edit mode, right? So what I can do is that I can wrap my input, right, field with a, with a Boolean operator saying that if module.editing is true, then show the input field, right? And so I can wrap this input field. I'm going to wrap it like that, parentheses. So only display this if you are editing mode, right? So if I go back here and I render it, notice that it's not in editing mode. But if I click on the pencil, right, it puts it in editing mode and it displays the input field. If I click on this one, right, it'll also put it in input field in editing mode, right? Also, when I press on enter, it'll turn off the editing mode, so it will disappear. Right? Enter. So notice that the code here is that you have the input field. It allows me to change it. It will update the module. And also if I press the key, right, and it's the enter key, it'll update the module and it'll turn off the editing. Okay. So yeah, it works. Also, I don't want to show both, right? If I'm showing the input field, I don't want to show the label. If I want to show the label, I don't want to show the input field. So this is kind of like the negation. I would say if you're not editing, right? So if I say, if you're not editing, then show the module name, right? So there it is. If I click here, notice that it just shows the input field, not the name. I can edit it, 1, 2, 3, and say enter, and then it has saved the change. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we can create new modules. We can delete modules. We can update modules, right? But then again, we want to be able to share, right, these changes that we've done with modules elsewhere, right, with perhaps other parts of the application, right? Not only be constrained within the module screen. I want to share it across the rest of the application. So what we could do is that we can we want to be able to implement the same CRUD operations, right, but not within the user interface. Instead, we can rip it out and create a reducer that has all that functionality, right, of manipulating the modules, adding modules, removing modules, right, editing and whatnot, right? But all implemented outside of the component, right? So let's do that. Let's create a reducer, right? So we'll create under modules. We'll create a reducer, and in there, right, we're going to create a slice for the modules. That, right? And notice that it has exactly the same functions that we just implemented, right? Edit, right? Update module, delete module, add module, right? But it's manipulating the state modules, right? Which is initialized as the the array of all modules in the database, right? So that's its initial state, which obviously we'll need to filter it based on the ID of the course, right? And so once we have that, right, we need to obviously make that state available across the application. So we'll need a store for that, right? So let's create a store under Kanbas. So under Kanbas, we'll create a store, paste it in there, right? Which reads the reducer, right? And it makes it available at this namespace of modules reducer. And then we have to provide this store, right, to the rest of the application, right? In the top level Kanbas, we're going to import the store, in Kanbas. Here we'll import it, the store, and then we'll provide it, right, to the whole application. So we'll wrap this whole thing with a provider, like that, right? And we'll wrap it here like that, right? So now everybody can access the modules, right? So we can refactor the modules so that instead of using the modules from the database and having a local state variable, instead it's going to grab it from the reducer, right? So let's import all the event handlers from the reducer. We'll need a dispatcher, we'll need a selector, right? So let's import all that. So back in modules here, we can import all that. And so we no longer are gonna need any of these state variables. We're no longer gonna need any of this, right? So the modules, instead of grabbing it from the, instead of grabbing it from here, right? We're no longer gonna need that. Instead, we're gonna grab it from here. And none of these functions are necessary anymore, right? Or delete, edit, update, add module, none of that is needed anymore. Instead, right, we're going to use a dispatcher to call the versions that are implemented in the reducer, right? Now the names are not, the same names. So now this add module, right? This add module is not this add module, right? It's not this one that we implemented. Instead, it's the one we are importing from the reducer, right? So to call this, right, remember, we can't call it directly. It needs to be through a dispatcher, right? So we'll need to make some little modifications, right? So all these invocations of add modules, blah, 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 all that. Well, right now, right, they can't be directly, right? It needs to be through a dispatcher. So let's fix this, right? So there's going to be a function call, so like this, right? And it's going to have a dispatcher, so dispatch like that, and like that. Why are you complaining? Add module, it's there. We're going to import it. And does it, do I need to pass? Oh, I do need to pass a couple of things. I need to pass in the module name and the course ID. Yep. So let's pass that in. There we go. So we have that one. Also, I'm gonna clear out the local module name. So notice this is a good example of the reducer and useState collaborating, right? Notice that the actual modification of the module is being done through the reducer, but the manipulation of the name of the module, right, is being done locally, right, in this component, where there's no sense of sharing this information with anyone else, right? It's a very local thing of populating the dialog box, right, with the name of the new module, right? There's no need to share that information with the rest of the application. It doesn't need to be in the reducer. So it's perfectly fine that this is indeed a local state variable, right? There's no point in sharing this with anyone, right? But the modules themselves, a new module being created, perhaps is important to share it with the rest of the application. So that it lives in the reducer. So again, if it's something that you need to share across the application, it would live in the reducer. If it's something that only makes sense in this component, then you would use a local state variable. All right. Yes, we did that. So we have to go through all the functions, right, that update or delete or manipulate the data structure. We need to wrap them in a dispatch, right? So let's go back here and let's see. Probably this needs to be any, and this needs to be any. So any function call like this update module, right? So that update module, right, needs to have a dispatch. So let's put dispatch, and close that. And we'll need another one here. And close that. Okay. What else? We need the module control, delete module. This is the module control buttons. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this, right, we need to wrap it in a dispatch. So let's do that. So the delete module takes as argument the module ID. So this is module ID, so module ID. And then this also calls module ID, so module ID. And we're going to wrap it in a dispatch. Like that, okay? And we'll do the same thing here, right? So edit module needs the ID, right? And needs the ID here, and needs the dispatch in front of it, okay? There we go. All right, anyone else? I think that's it, right? So if we go back to rendering, right, this should work the same way, right? I'm going to create, this is using the local state variable for the module name. So this is module ABC, add module, it adds it, right? But it's in the reducer, right? As opposed to using the local state, right? I should be able to delete just like before, but again, using through the reducer, not through the local state, right? And I should be able to edit this, right? 1, 2, 3, enter, right? And it updates, okay? Again, not through the local use state, but through the reducer, right? Having removed, all the implementations, right, from here, having moved all that to the reducer so that all the changes are accessible throughout the application, okay? Right, so the assignment goes on asking you to do the same thing, right, that we did for modules and the courses, right, of being able to delete, update, and whatnot, right? But on your own, you're going to do it for the assignments, right? So for the assignments, you're going to have to have a reducer, just following the lead of what we did for modules, right? You're going to do the same thing for assignments. You're going to create a reducer for assignments, and where you're going to be able to implement there all the CRUD operations for the assignments. You have to be able to add an assignment, delete an assignment, update an assignment, right? And then read all that information and render that as a list of assignments where if you click on an assignment, it goes to the assignment editor, right? And then you can edit that assignment, okay? All right, yeah, and it's described here. Deleting an assignment, editing an assignment, creating an assignment, all right? All right, yeah, that's all I had for you today. Any questions?
Hi, Professor. I have a question about the deleting an assignment.
Okay.
So, so when can I share my screen?
Yeah, so let's go into office hours, right? And we can
Okay.
debug
Yeah.
and work together on that.
Yeah.
Let's take a really short break and we'll do
Okay.
office hours and we can, yeah, we can debug it together, all right?
Okay. Sounds good.
Right back.